Hello, everyone, and welcome to Inquirer Live. I'm Gina Mizell, Sixers beat reporter for the Philadelphia Inquirer, coming to you live from the Wells Fargo Center, where the Sixers are set to play the Brooklyn Nets tonight in one of the most highly anticipated games of the NBA regular season. This is the first matchup between these two teams since the blockbuster trade that finally sent Ben Simmons to the Brooklyn Nets after a months-long saga and brought James Harden to Philly. Before we get started, I'd like to welcome you to submit comments and questions. You can do this by using the comment section at the bottom of this page. If you're watching on social media, head over to inquirer.com/live to submit your questions. And without further ado, I'd like to welcome my colleague, sports columnist David Murphy, to the conversation.
Hello, Gina.
What's up, David? What's
Not
up?
much. The lights are on in Wells Fargo Center. We were sitting in the dark here for a long time, but Ben Simmons must have just arrived.
Yes, that you can tell behind us. They're getting ready for the game tonight. They're doing pregame video. I can hear some bouncing balls. So now finally we're getting game tonight. You alluded to Ben Simmons, and we will talk about, the reaction that we expect to get from him tonight. But let's start with the James Harden effect. And it's now been exactly 1 month since he was traded to the Sixers, and he's played in 5 games for this team. And I think it's gone about as well as one could expect. So just what have been your biggest impressions of the James Harden experience so far as a member of the Sixers?
Well, I mean, I think it's probably the same impression as a lot of people have had. This guy is a lot more of a true point guard than we have seen. In his previous stops. Apparently, the few times he was on the court in Brooklyn, he's looked a lot more like this playmaker that we've seen. But when I heard and advocated for James Harden coming here to the Sixers, it was with the thought that he was going to be a 30-point-a-game scorer who, was kind of the guy that we saw in Houston. And right now, I mean, he's been he's really fit into the fabric of this team better than I ever could have imagined. He has just he's fine being second fiddle with Embiid. He's fine taking 12 shots a game. His passing, his playmaking, just his feel for the court. We've always known this guy had it and that he could do it, but to actually see him kind of make that transition from the top 75 of all time scorer that we saw in Houston for a decade to become more of a distributor and a playmaker and a facilitator it's been really fun to watch.
Yeah, absolutely. No, and I think that's been something that you talk to some of his new teammates, you talk to Coach Doc Rivers, and they say it kind of either reminds them the way he was in Brooklyn, like you said, in those first few months that he was with the Nets when that team was whole and Kevin Durant was playing, Kyrie Irving was playing, and he was kind of taking a back seat as far as a scoring perspective. And you even can go back to his Oklahoma City days when he was the sixth man on a finals team, when he was more of the backup point guard on that unit and was able to facilitate and play make. And it was when he went to Houston that he became the 30-point scorer that you were alluding to. But I think the biggest thing people were most anxious or anticipating was how's he going to mesh with Joel Embiid. And so far, that pairing has been really, really good. But it hasn't just extended to him. It's the impact on Tyrese Maxey's game. It's the impact on someone like Matisse Thybulle, who's become a double-digit scorer, which he has not been this season at all. So where do you see the trickle-down effects mostly with what James has been able to do?
Well, I mean, it's interesting, and one of the reasons why the Sixers team has been so frustrating over the years is you could see with your own two eyes what their problem was, and it was just a matter of spacing. With Ben Simmons and Joel Embiid on the court, you couldn't afford to have a guy like Matisse Thybulle out there, at least not, expecting him to score, 8 to 10 points a game. It just more often than not, it looked like, that boat in the Suez Canal when it was just jackknifed for a month, like that's what their half court offense looked like. And it's not complicated to anybody who's watched this team. I mean, they did not guard Ben Simmons out past the foul line. They did not guard Matisse Thybulle out past the 12-foot mark on the baseline. All of a sudden, you have a guy who single-handedly changes all of that. And not only do they have to guard James Harden, they have to roll the defense to James Harden. They have to double team James Harden. They have to be aware of James Harden. And when you add in Joel Embiid and the need to constantly help with him, it's going to open up space for other people. And I think Maxey's been great, but to your point, I think Thybulle's been the guy that we've seen it with most, where he's a very limited offensive player. He essentially has one skill set. He can play above the rim, and he's very athletic, and he's kind of intuitive, and he can roll to the hoop. And he just wasn't able to do that when Simmons and Embiid were on the court together. And now all of a sudden, he's got tons of space. So look, it's not a complicated game. It's all about space. Brett Brown said it. Brian Colangelo said it. Sam Hinkie said it. Elton Brand said it. Brett Brown said it. Everyone has said it. And it's only now that we're finally seeing it. And what do you know? They're 5-0 with Harden and Embiid in the lineup together.
Yeah, absolutely. No, a point on Thibault, and a shameless plug is I wrote about that in his Inquirer and his ability to screen and roll, his ability to cut, and just the fact that he scored in double figures 8 times this season, and 3 of those have been in Harden's 5 games. So if that's like such a stark indicator of the impact that he's had on the floor, and of course, again, that extends to Tyrese Maxey, Joel Embiid, and a lot of these complementary players. One guy that still seems to be finding his way with James Harden is Tobias Harris, and we've talked and written a lot about this. Has been kind of a strange season for him. With he had a pretty significant battle with COVID early on in the season. He's been battling a shoulder injury for a lot of the year that he's just playing through right now, tendonitis in that shoulder, and he's kind of taken a back seat now. It's like when you talk about the quote unquote big 3 of this team, it's Embiid, Harden, and Tyrese Maxey from a scoring perspective. And so can Tobias Harris find his way with this iteration of this team, or is this maybe a sign that he's not I don't want to say that he's not long for this organization, but that maybe he's not the right fit with these 3 guys long term?
Yeah. I mean, I think that goes without question. And honestly, I don't think that was ever. It was never a question that Tobias Harris was going to struggle. At least not for anybody who has watched Tobias Harris here. We saw him go through the exact same thing once Jimmy Butler got here. And look, I'm a big Tobias Harris advocate as a leader, as a teammate. I think he does good things. I think he's a great basketball player. He's got a very smooth, fun game to watch. But the fact is, there's a reason why he's been on 4 or 5 teams and been traded 4 or 5 times. And look, his lot in life is his lot in life is to be the best player on a bad team, or a mediocre team, because he needs the ball in his hands. He's a volume guy, he's a rhythm guy, and he's just never been a catch and shoot. He is not the guy. His skill set is not the skill set that the Sixers need for him to maximize his position right now. They need him to catch and shoot, knock down shots, play good defense, rebound, and finish at the rim. And Tobias has just never been a guy who does really any of those things. I mean, his defense has been better as of late, but he's not going to score a ton through contact. He's not going to shoot 42% on open catch and shoot threes. And I can understand why he looks like a fish out of water, because he is a fish out of water. He just doesn't. He's not a third fiddle. He's not a third or fourth fiddle, and they need him to be that right now. And he's just not. I would be very surprised if Tobias Harris is back here this year. The question is, can they get him to a point where he can, give them, 10 possessions a game where he makes a positive impact, and we'll see. That's on Doc Rivers. Doc's got to figure that out.
Yeah, no, and we're seeing in the rotations that James Harden and Tobias are often playing together. They'll sub them both out in midway through the first quarter and bring them back in. And so there is plenty of opportunity for them to kind of establish a sort of chemistry, or at least to play off each other a little bit. But it just hasn't quite happened so far this season, or so far during this experiment, where you see then the minutes where maybe Tyrese Maxey is playing with Joel Embiid, and Tyrese Maxey's back to being the lead ball handler, and you're like, oh, this looks familiar from earlier this season. And it's been really interesting to see it all sort of unfold. You say in the way that you thought it would, but to really kind of see it play out in that way has been pretty interesting in this small sample size.
Yeah, the only reason I say it was kind of preordained is just if you watched the Sixers in the playoffs 2 years ago, 3 years ago, when Jimmy Butler was here, Tobias Harris looks like the exact same guy, and it's a guy who's night and day from what he was before another alpha ball handler showed up. I mean, he was invisible in the postseason in 2018, 2019. And, he's just not, he's just, it's a maddening thing about Tobias. You wish he has such a good stroke, and he's a guy who has shot 40% from 3-point range over several seasons in a row, but he's still just not a catch and shoot knockdown shooter, and that's what they need right now. And those are the opportunities you're going to get with a guy like James Harden on the court with you.
Yep, and to be fair, Tobias has been pretty open to saying, "Hey, maybe my game needs to change right now." Seems willing to change or willing to kind of shift some things, which you give him credit for that. But certainly, is just a different player with these guys on the floor. But to go back to James Harden as well, we obviously have talked about his on the court impact, his scoring, his facilitating, but his demeanor and his leadership, I think, is something that's been really interesting to talk to Doc Rivers or talk to teammates about, because of course James Harden doesn't have the best reputation as far as being a teammate, being a guy that's kind of forced his way out of his last two stops. Maybe has not been the best teammate in that regard, and guys just can't say enough good things about him. And so are we just still so early in this honeymoon phase of this season and him getting into a new situation, or is this something you're going to be constantly monitoring as far as, when does the flip switch, when does James Harden get tired of Joel Embiid, or just kind of how do you plan to monitor that side of the James Harden experience, I suppose?
I think it's a valid question. Look, it is a question. There is some unknown there. There is some risk there. We'll see. But I will say this, apart from the last 2 years, James Harden, one could argue, has been the consummate teammate. He was in Oklahoma City, never said boo about being a sixth man. He's changed. He has constantly changed his game to kind of adapt to whatever talent gets thrown around him. The one, I think the biggest look, I would probably be a bad teammate to Kyrie Irving because the guy is like crazy, and you can kind of empathize with James Harden there. I don't know that Kyrie Irving deserves the benefit of the doubt over James Harden. In Houston, like in a perfect world, you wouldn't force your way out of town. But look, he wants to win a title. We've seen plenty of people do it. I don't know that makes you a bad teammate. He was never an actual teammate to those guys. He played 9 games with John Wall, or whoever was on the Rockets at that time. I guess Chris Paul is the one red flag you could point to. But again, they they could have beat the best team. They came very close to beating the best team of all time. And at that point, probably winning a title. So, and Chris Paul, again, he's not necessarily been known as the best teammate throughout the course of his career. It is a question, but I don't know it's like Jimmy Butler where we should assume or even be surprised that James Harden has been what he's been. He has struck me as a guy who wants to win a title and is a very smart basketball player and knows the sort of supporting cast that he needs and is acutely aware of his own strengths and therefore of other people's strengths and their weaknesses as well. And look, the guy, I would have forced my way out of anywhere that required me to play with Russell Westbrook. I would not have been able to take Kyrie Irving seriously. I think he's had very natural human reactions to both of those situations. And I don't know. I think Harden's got a little bit of a bad rap in terms of the level of benefit of the doubt that we're giving him.
Sure. And it will be really interesting to see how he handles facing his former team tonight. You were the one who asked him on Monday after that game if there was any extra juice for him for this game, and he said no. And then you said, "Oh, it's how'd you phrase it? Is it that easy to turn the page?" And he was like, "Yeah. What do you want me to do?" So I felt like the shortness of that answer maybe signaled that it does mean a little bit more for him, but it's going to be interesting to see.
Of course. Again, it's always the same. It's pretty much always the same interaction when you ask those questions. He doth protested too much. But the guy was out there running stairs after the game. And James Harden, from what I understand, don't run a lot of stairs. Obviously it means something to him. Like, come on, the guy's, the guy has been beaten up on. He was kind of, it did not end well there. And we're sitting here talking about his reputation as a teammate, and I'm sure that bothers him. and he would like to, he would like to. I mean, yeah, can we just get back to that? He had Kyrie Irving lighting incense in the locker room, like if I yeah, it didn't end well there, but it might not have been well there to begin with, So, I'm interested to see. I think it would be different if he was going back to Brooklyn. And look, I think it would be different if he had actually played more than 65 games for them or whatever, in two COVID shortened seasons. I don't know that he, I don't know that there was much for him to there weren't a lot of tributes to be given to him on their video. He just wasn't there long enough. So yeah, to a certain extent, I think probably the Houston return probably would still mean more to him. But of course, you want to throw it in Kyrie's face, throw it in Durant's face, and kind of just that, say this is the team that I thought we were going to be in Brooklyn and never were. No offense to Kyrie Irving, by the way, but the guy, come on.
Right. That's why I feel like we need a playoff series between these two teams to really get both sets of players to go back to those home gyms and games that matter. I think the basketball gods need to give that to us. But to sort of segue then into the guy coming back to Philadelphia, which I think is what most people want to talk about or have opinions on or all of that. Ben Simmons back in the gym tonight.
I thought you were talking about Seth Curry.
You couldn't even say his name. You tried to say his brother's name. Yeah, no, Ben Simmons back in the building tonight. Just so much has been built up as far as how the fans are going to react to him when he's sitting on the bench. He obviously is not going to play tonight because of some back issues that have prevented him from playing or practicing with his team. He has not played yet for the Nets, but just what are you anticipating tonight? I'm still fairly new to Philly. I just moved here in September, so I haven't quite experienced the total, I guess, hated Philadelphia fan experience for a hated athlete. So what am I in store for tonight as far as what I'm going to be hearing from these fans?
Well, apparently, I mean, I think the biggest news of this whole thing is that it turns out Ben Simmons' heart is in his back, if that's where the issue is. I think that it's clear why he's not playing tonight, and frankly, I don't blame the guy. I don't blame the Nets for keeping him, on the sidelines. It would not be a good scene for him, and kind of having been around him and seeing, clearly how it all ended here. I don't think it would have, I think it would have had a high potential to kind of derail his career in Brooklyn before it even started, because clearly he's a guy who does not respond to criticism well, and does not respond to adversity well. I mean, say what you will about anything else. I mean, those are two things that he's kind of left without a shadow of the doubt. Just kind of the way he's handled all of this adversity. What do I expect tonight? I don't know. I think it's going to be interesting. I don't think that there's ever been the level of vitriol and kind of just palpable disgust that exists within the Philadelphia sports fan base right now. But I don't think it's even close. I think that I'm actually somewhat concerned. I really hope the city does not embarrass itself, because there's kind of, I've never seen, the emotion. This is an emotional city, and I have never seen the emotion level as high as it is with any athlete, anywhere close to what it is with Simmons, and rightly so. I mean, he could not have handled these last 7 or 8 months any worse than he did. That being said, I don't know how I don't know how much of an opportunity the fans are really gonna have to put him in their focus. I'm sure we'll have some chance, and we'll have just a lot of electricity in the building in general. But I mean, look, he's not going to be out there on the court. His name is never going to be announced, I don't think. He's never going to be on the jumbotron. So I just don't know. I just kind of game planning this out. I'm curious, but I just don't. I think there's I don't see a lot of opportunities where the entire arena at the same time can kind of focus on him. I don't know. Unless the Sixers go out of the way to inflame the situation with their in-game production, which I don't think they will, because I think that they know things could go off the rails. So I think it could be a bit anticlimactic to answer your question, but I'm also curious.
Yeah, no, I agree with you that the Sixers in-game ops won't do anything to try to make the situation any worse. I mean, they were even in their intro video for the trade. He was even in a couple of shots. It was usually from the back. You would just see the 25, but he was even in the pregame intro video, which literally was not playing for the team or not practicing with the team. He was just on the roster. So I don't see them doing anything. But I was going to say, you mean you're not looking forward to the Ben Simmons tribute video tonight that Doc Rivers said he was thinking might happen?
I actually think that they should have one for Seth Curry and Andre Drummond. I mean, Seth Curry probably has meant more to this, Yeah, I don't know. I don't know how they're going to handle it. I mean, look, this isn't going to be the first time that Ben Simmons, is in the building, and he'll be in uniform at some point down the road. I don't know how they're going to handle it. It'd be fascinating actually to kind of sit in on those meetings and have them discuss. But especially now with the recent news that he's going to be filing a grievance, which is expected, but like they're in litigation right now. Like I don't think you give tribute videos to people who you're in litigation with. It's like yeah, like you can give. It's like divorce. I'm sure like there's time to give you tribute to your ex-wife at some point, but it's not in the courtroom. So I think this is kind of the courtroom right now, and I don't think it would make much sense to call any attention really to Simmons other than whatever organically happens with the crowd.
Right. Yeah, no, it was interesting too being at shoot around here this morning, Nets shoot around, and Steve Nash, of course, was asked about what he was expecting as a reaction, and he said, I hope Ben enjoys it. That he as a player had received, in the subject of boos from a whole crowd. I assume maybe when he went back to Dallas after signing with the Suns, and said he hopes he enjoys it, which I don't know. That seems going a little bit far, given that one of the reasons that apparently Ben was unable to play for the Sixers as he was not mentally ready to play. So I don't know how that's going to play, or if that's the approach that you want to take with somebody. But those were Steve Nash's comments tonight or this morning.
Yeah, I mean it. Look, we're just gonna have to wait and see, is what it comes down to. I mean, he's. I've never actually. I don't know if I've ever actually seen an opposing player, become anything other than more motivated when he's booed. It's a lot. It hits a lot different when you're a home player and you get booed. But when you're Jared Dudley, I mean, guys like that thrive off this stuff. So, I don't know that it's going to be. I don't know that it's really going to be really all that notable. But we'll find out. I don't know that it's a good idea for them to have him here, but at the same time, like, look, this is an adult. He makes $35 million a year to play in front of 20,000 people, and you gotta have a thick skin. And if this ends up being a bad thing for Ben Simmons, then it was doomed anyway. So I think that's probably the best way to look at it.
Right. I want to read a couple comments from some viewers that have been rolling in. This one is from John G. It says, let's see how much better his back feels after tonight's game. I suspect he'll be on the court soon after. I laughed at Nash's attempt at using reverse psychology. All I really care about is the Sixers beating the Nets because the Celtics are hot on their tail. That's a good precursor to, we'll talk about the Eastern Conference playoff race here in a little bit. See another one from 296. Picking on Ben now is picking the low-hanging fruit. He's a tremendous player, and he won the battle with Philly fans. His team is treating him with respect, so I doubt he cares what Philly says about him anymore. The worst thing for me would be to show up and just sit there and smile at all the verbal abuse, which is going to rain down on him. That would give him the chance to say, okay, Philly, hit me with your best shot. You can't hurt me anymore. So a couple of various opinions. I assume one person is from here, and potentially one person might be from Brooklyn, or at least a Nets fan, or maybe not a Sixers fan. But it's interesting to see the different discourse as far as what people are expecting tonight.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know what M. Soren is looking at, but everyone has their own reality, I guess. I don't know that there was ever a battle with Philly fans, and if there was, I don't know that Ben Simmons won it. I mean, he definitely won the right to not be here anymore, and the problem is the Sixers are better off for it. And really, until his holdout, this town treated Ben Simmons fine. Like that's kind of a narrative that's developed here I think it's driven a lot by the national media who are kind of resting on old tropes about Philly sports fans and just assuming that's the way it went down. Like, look, man, Sixers fans have been nothing but supportive to Ben Simmons. They've gotten restless before. They've wanted him to shoot, but he's never really been booed. Yeah, they got on him after Game 7 last year, but I mean, he deserved to be gotten on. It's there was more than enough room for Ben Simmons to come back here this year and kind of right the wrongs and kind of atone for his absence in Game 5, 6, and 7 last year, and kind of just take the next step in his career. And he chose the opposite way. I'm as critical of Philadelphia fans as anybody in this city when they give me the opportunity to be. But this is not a situation where Philly fans should feel ashamed of how they've behaved at all. Now maybe that will change after tonight, but they've treated everyone on the Sixers team with way more respect than a lot of fan bases would afford guys like Ben Simmons, Markelle Fultz. I think they've been very. I think they can hold their head high thus far with regard to the whole Ben Simmons saga.
Yeah, one more comment, and this kind of is a dovetail from why Ben Simmons is back here, but this is from Bad Love that just says, I would not mind seeing Andre Drummond back here after the season. Of course, Andre Drummond was a late addition to that trade. He was Joel Embiid's backup center, and that is now his inclusion in the trade has caused the Sixers to now try Paul Millsap at backup center. They just signed DeAndre Jordan, who played for the first time on Monday. Of course, Seth Curry, like you mentioned, was also in that trade. And I will be curious to see if he's acknowledged in some way, like you said, because he has been such a key player was such a key player for this team for the past couple of seasons. I guess just as a question off of that, just how do you feel like the Sixers have handled the loss of Seth Curry and Andre Drummond? Obviously, James Harden can provide a lot of that shooting and a lot of kind of he's right into that starting spot, I guess you could say. But the backup center situation has been a little bit tougher to manage for this team. So how do you think they've dealt with the loss of those other pieces?
I mean, they've both been losses, but I don't know that either one of them are the kind of loss that will. I don't know that you've really noticed them all that much. Look, I think Andre Drummond and James Harden in the pick and roll for 15 minutes a night would have been a heck of a thing to watch. But I mean, let's watch Andre Drummond tonight against Joel Embiid. The guy does not play good defense. There's a reason why he was available for $2.5 million. Yes, from what I mean, he's definitely better than Paul Millsap, and from what I've heard, he's got way more left in the tank than DeAndre Jordan. But let's keep things in perspective. I mean, we had people last year, moaning about the loss of Tony Bradley, and we saw Joel Embiid just absolutely abuse him the other night. So yeah, it's a loss, but it's one of those things that I don't, it's marginal. Would it be great to see Drummond back here next year? Sure. I mean, it's really hard to find a backup center in the NBA right now. If you look at guys like the Bulls, I mean, picking up Tristan Thompson off the waiver wire and having Tony Bradley behind him. I mean, even like the Heat, it's really hard to find a solid backup center, and the Sixers know that better than anybody. So yes, I mean, a loss, yes. A reunion, sure, but I don't think on the list of decisive factors for where the season ends, I don't think Andre Drummond is going to be even really all that worthy of talking about.
So there is actually a basketball game tonight between two teams, and the Nets. Obviously, their struggles with Kevin Durant's injury at one point, James Harden's injury, Kyrie Irving's part-time player situation that's been well documented. So, just from an on-court perspective, what are you most excited to watch tonight? What are you most looking for? This could be a potential playoff matchup preview based on how things are shaking. What are you most looking forward to watching on the actual court tonight? Not all the extra hubbub that's
around this game. I mean, I'm interested in Embiid versus look, I think I think Embiid is an unsolvable problem for a lot of teams, and I think the Nets might be one of those teams. You know, look, they're starting a guy right now who was playing 15 minutes a night for the Sixers. You know, for the first half of the season. You know, I mean, I do think the Nets are more of a threat than people are giving them credit for. I would not want to play the Nets in the first round of the playoffs. I'm not saying that I would pick the Sixers to win, but I think that they've got a lot. Kyrie Irving is he's might have a couple screws loose, but he's a very good basketball player. And he's the kind of guy that can carry a game. Kevin Durant is, if we weren't playing with if he wasn't playing at the same time as LeBron James, we'd be talking about him as the best, potential greatest basketball player of all time. Anytime you have one of the greatest basketball players of all time on the court, that's a team to be reckoned with. And if Simmons can solidify that defense, it would, I think that they have a chance to make some noise. That being said, I think Simmons, he's the big question, and we're not going to see him tonight. So I think it's going to be a good game, and it's going to be interesting to watch. But if you're talking about individual matchups, I want to see just how Brooklyn tries to stop Embiid, because they're not going to, I don't know that Simmons is going to help with that. I'm just kind of interested in. I just think it's going to be a very, very kind of hype atmosphere, and it's going to be fun to watch.
Absolutely. Yeah, let's now look ahead, because this night has been much anticipated, but it's going to be over here in just a little bit, or a couple hours. But we're coming down the stretch of the regular season. I think it's fair to say that the Sixers are one of the most intriguing teams, if not the most intriguing team in the NBA, just because everyone is still going to be monitoring how James Harden continues to mesh with this new team and how far they can go. But what are you most looking forward to as far as the last 18 games, I think it is now, of the season, whether it's a James Harden impact, whether it's something else? Just what are your biggest questions or your biggest that you're going to be watching storyline wise as far as this team?
Well, I mean, obviously the biggest question with this team is always going to be, can they stay healthy? I think the one, I haven't heard many people talk about it, but Harden still doesn't look completely right to me. He looks a step slower than he did in his heyday, and maybe that's just maybe he messed his hamstring up so bad that it's just never going back to its previous level, and kind of this is who he is. But he's still taking some maintenance days off, and it was it wasn't. I don't think it was a fake injury. I mean, I think that there was a very real problem with his hammy, and so I think that's the biggest question. And with Embiid, with him, the problem is the way he plays. Everything could change in a moment. We saw that last year against Robin Lopez and the Wizards. I mean, it's a freak thing, but he plays in a freakish way. So kind of keeping him healthy is obviously going to be the big thing. I don't know that that's really anything more than a matter of luck or good fortune. Beyond that, I think you need to have a shooter step up here. Whether it's whether it's Tobias, he might be the best. He might be the best option. Korkmaz, he didn't even get in the game last time. Danny Green's going to be out here for a couple of weeks perhaps. I think they need another shooter to step up, and I love Matisse Thybulle as a player, as a guy, as a photographer. But he's just I don't think he's shown us any reason to believe that he's going to be comfortable kind of stepping into catch and shoot shots consistently. And I think the Sixers need a guy who can do that. I think it would have been great if they could have held on to Curry somehow, just to have that option out there. But I think you're going to need to see a guy like Furkan Korkmaz, Isaiah Joe. One of these guys is going to have to get hot, or at least in a rhythm. I think that might be the biggest difference between success and failure for the Sixers team, if they can get a shooter to step up.
Yeah, we got a couple comments, both of these about Embiid in our chat. This is from John G. He says, yeah, no question about it that Embiid is more Razor-like focused this season. You can see that he takes the game, his career, and legacy more seriously, but without his improved physical fitness, consistent greatness would have remained elusive. That goes to your column that you wrote off of the Chicago game on Monday. And then also from Balfour, let's wait and see how many turnovers Embiid produces in the postseason. He handed the Hawks series to Atlanta with his record number of turnovers. So, any thoughts on either one of those comments?
Yeah, I mean, I disagree with Balfour. I don't know that Embiid was on the list of people that should bear blame for. I mean, look, Tobias Harris. Everyone forgets he probably shot like 4 for 20 from the field in the last couple of games of that series, and so many of them were bunny. I mean, same shots we're seeing him miss now. But that was way more impact. I mean, Ben Simmons just going into a shell was way more impactful. Steph Curry getting torched on defense was way more impactful. Embiid. I think Embiid is a much better player this year than he was last year. I think he's more mature, better in shape, whatever. But he was asked with a bum knee, mind you. He was asked to do so much that it's really hard to blame him for kind of getting gas down the stretch there. Yeah, I mean, sure, you would love for him to not have had the turnovers that he did, but I mean, he was a one-man band last year, and he very nearly took them to the conference finals. So I would probably ease up on that a little bit. But yeah, he's clearly more mature. Clearly, you can just see it. I don't know if it's fatherhood. I don't know if it's just getting, I don't know if it's just the aging process, but I don't know if it's Simmons things, but he's a guy, like his maturity, you can see it, pretty much with everything he does, with everything he says. And you can see it in this game. He's just much more under control, much more confident, much more, just much more of a quote unquote man out there, where he was more of a adolescent before.
Yeah. And you can tell that reliability, durability, availability, whatever ability you want to say is important to him this year. And that's, I think in his mind, that's the reason why he did not win MVP last year. And maybe that's correct. And now he's in another tight race with Nikola Jokic is doing amazing things again. Obviously, Giannis is playing great. Joel's had a great season. And so it's going to be, I think that as far as storylines for me, I think that's what I'm going to be really watching is just this MVP race down the stretch, because I think you've got three guys, all front court players too, which is pretty rare for a race like this, that are all playing at such a high level. And Embiid's going to have to continue to be at that high level to potentially win the MVP.
Yeah, I mean it's going to be, and again, I hate even talking about it just because it's one of those things that could change on a dime if he turns his ankle, lands on his foot wrong, whatever. So yeah, we'll see. I think that he's done everything that he has done everything that within his power to make himself the front runner in that race. And with all due respect to Nikola Jokic, I would take Embiid just because of his defensive presence. And I think we saw that against the Bulls. He changes the game so much just being out there. I mean, guys just don't even look. They don't even look at the rim when they're inside 10 feet. So yeah, it all depends. Can he avoid that fluke injury that we've seen him have a lot down the stretch here?
Absolutely. When you look at the rest of the Eastern Conference playoff race, it's been so tight for most of the season. You're seeing teams like Boston and the run they've been on. You've seen a team like Cleveland that such a feel-good story. They've maybe Chicago, kind of the same thing. Seeing Miami create a little bit of separation at the top. Just how do you envision this Eastern Conference playoff race shaking out, and maybe who is the team that's the biggest challenge to the Sixers, you think, in getting to the finals?
I mean, the team with the biggest challenge is the Heat, pretty clearly to me. I just think Butler and Lowry are just complete animals out there. I just love their makeup, love their tenacity. I think that they're, I'll take any team that has those two guys on it in the playoffs, regardless of the talent. And then the Bucks, obviously, I think the Sixers. Look, I think the Sixers. It would be no contest against the Bulls. It would be no contest against the Cavaliers. It would be no contest against pretty much everybody except for the Heat, the Bucks, and the Nets. Unless I'm missing somebody. Celtics.
I was going to say Celtics have played really, really well.
I'm interested to see them. I'm interested to see them against the Celtics, but yeah, I don't think. I don't think the Celtics. They don't worry me. The Heat worry me. And then obviously, Giannis should always worry you. But I would have, I think the Heat would still be my pick. just because it's really tough to build a championship team midseason. And the Sixers would have to overcome, they would have to overcome a lot of precedent to do it. But I think that they're right there, at number 2.
Yeah, I wonder with Boston, maybe I'm just still thinking about that 48-point loss a couple weeks ago. That's just like still burned in my brain. And
Sure.
not necessarily just that, but those big wing scores with what Jason Tatum's doing right now, with what Jaylen Brown's doing right now. And yes, you've got a great perimeter defender on the Sixers team and Matisse Thybulle, but what else do you do beyond that as far as guarding those two guys? I think that would make things a little squirrely. But also, depending on where this all shakes out, you know, most likely wouldn't see them in round 1, but I could be, as far as trying to clear that second round hurdle that this team's been trying to do for the last few years, that could be a really interesting series for sure.
Yeah, the biggest concern, with the Celtics is Al Horford. Al Horford has had Joel Embiid's number throughout his career. So I think that's probably, that defense is just, it's a very good defense. Might be the best defense in the league. So yeah, they're certainly an interesting matchup, but the whole reason you get James Harden is so you don't have to worry about teams like the Celtics, because a guy like that can overcome those things. So I think if we were talking about the Celtics February, or the Sixers pre-February, the Celtics would be, you would dread playing them. But the whole idea is Harden is the guy that even a great defense can't stop. And I would still feel pretty comfortable if I were the Sixers going into that series, but I am interested. It's one of those things that will be interesting to see as this whole thing plays out.
Absolutely. Well, we are going to wrap things up here pretty soon. David, any final thoughts about tonight, about this matchup, about Ben Simmons, about James Harden, anything that we haven't covered in these 45 minutes?
I think, I don't know. I think I'm going to go get some dinner at some point.
Yeah, my stomach is gurgling as well. And at least they kept the lights on the whole time, which again,
it was nice.
Yeah, it's all good. Well, thank you all so much for tuning into Inquirer Live. Be sure to head over to inquirer.com/GameDayCentral to follow the game and chat with us and other Sixers reporters. We will catch you next time. Enjoy the game, everybody.